So here we are into Programming Assignment 3. At this point, you've learned everything there is to know about programming in the course. As the course is given, that is. Of course, it's up to you to investigate further. So, your job for this assignment is to make a game that is a two-player cross between Pong and Brick Breaker. I've dubbed it Pong Breaker. It's like Pong in that each player controls a paddle, a rectangle in this case, that can freely move up and down. So player 1 will use the W and S keys, W for up, S for down, and player 2 will use the up and down arrow keys. There will be a ball that starts in the center of the play area. We can see this right here. At the beginning of each round, the ball sits in the center and doesn't move until something tells it to move, maybe a certain amount of time, or in this case, the space key. And then it'll start to move in one of 4 random diagonal directions. So up and to the right, down to the right, down to the left, or up and to the left. So it's going to choose one of those 4 directions and move accordingly. So the game is made up of 2 areas. Up here at the top, we see the HUD area. Now the HUD area, the heads-up display, is meant to display the time remaining, starts at 60 seconds, and the score for player 1 and the score for player 2. Below that is the play area, and this is where the gameplay is actually going to occur. You can see that it's bordered by two border walls, so nothing can exceed those walls. That includes the ball as well as the paddles. Nothing can go past either one of those walls. The play area is also made up, of course, the ball, any instructions that need to be displayed, and this back set of bricks. We're going to call them wall bricks, and that's really where the idea of Brick Breaker comes into play. So now let's just talk about this for a second. So the paddles cannot move beyond those play areas, as we said. The ball will always move at 45-degree angles and will bounce off of all surfaces it contacts. So the top and bottom walls, the paddles, the brick walls, everything. Basically, that implies it flipping its direction with whatever movement it should be going to. So for example, if it collides with a top or a bottom wall, it's got to flip its Y direction. So if it's moving up and hits the top wall, that means it has a Y direction of negative. So basically we have to change that negative to a positive, so it will start moving down. Similarly, if it's moving down, it has a positive Y direction. When it hits that wall, we just switch it to a negative Y direction. So that's where the Y direction is going to change. The X direction changes when it collides with any other object in the game. So it might be one of the paddles, it might be one of the brick walls. So the X direction will get flipped. So if it's moving to the right, the X direction will be converted into a negative and it'll start moving to the left, and vice versa for the opposite side. So that's really the key there. So the Brick Breaker element, as I mentioned before, occurs behind each player's paddle. So at the edge of the screen will be a collection, think about it like an array, of bricks that are defending the scoring area, so the edge of the screen. If a player has any one of their bricks hit, the brick is destroyed. Now in this demo that I'm going to show you, it's not actually destroyed. All I've done is I've basically faded it out. And in my collision logic, I've just said don't collide with anything that's faded out, just to keep it simple. You could just, if you wanted, you could have it destroyed or move it off the screen or whatever you want, so you don't have to deal with that. It's up to you. So if one of those bricks is destroyed, there's now basically a gap there, which means if the ball goes through that gap, that person is scored against. So if the ball goes through a gap in the blue side, the red team, player 1, scores points. So points are scored in one of 2 ways. The first way is every time one of the wall bricks is destroyed, 1 point is scored for the opposite team. So if a blue wall brick is hit, red will get 1 point. They can score 2 points by actually putting it through the wall and into the other side. Now the 2 points that these scoring mechanisms result in a win or a loss in the game. So the game is going to end in one of 3 ways. First of all, if anybody scores 7 points, the game's over immediately and that person wins. The second way is if the time runs out, so all 60 seconds are gone, whoever has the most points at the end of the 60 seconds wins. Finally, if time runs out and it's still a tie score, everybody's a loser. Nobody wins. It's a tie. So basically, when the game is over, the player is the players are asked if they want to play again. If they say no, just use a system.exit command and that will exit the game. If they choose yes, that means you have to reset everything. All the times, all the scores, all the positions, all the bricks, which ones are collidable, all that type of stuff needs to be reset right back to the way they were at the very beginning of the game. Now, one point I didn't touch on yet is when the ball collides with the paddle, yes, the X direction will be flipped. So if it collides with the blue paddle, that means the X direction is currently positive, it gets flipped to a negative. But the Y direction is also going to be flipped in this case too, or potentially. If the ball collides with the top half of the paddle, then that means that the ball is going to bounce up. So if it collides, let's say for example right about here, not only is the X direction going to get flipped, but the Y direction is going to be set to a negative value, so it will automatically bounce up. Similarly, if it collides with the bottom half, then the Y direction is going to be set to a positive, which means it's going to bounce down every single time. So what this does, it allows us to set up a certain semblance of control for the player, so they can enforce that it bounces off certain walls and directions based on where they want the ball to collide with. So that gives the player a little bit more strategy to work with. So just a few things just to round some stuff out. There are a few limitations to consider. First of all, as I said before, nothing can exceed the yellow bars or the edge of the screen unless it's a point scored. So a paddle can't move above or below. The ball can't collide or can't go past any of the yellow bars. Secondly, the paddle moves at a specific rate of 6 pixels per update. So if I'm holding the up key, then the blue paddle is going to move up 6 pixels each update. Next, so the ball is going to start off at a speed of 1 pixel per update. So both in the X and the Y direction. So that means that it's going to move pretty slow at the beginning of the game. Very slow, in fact. But every time the ball collides with a surface, whether that is a wall, a brick wall, or a paddle, that speed is going to increase by 1 pixel per update, which is going to speed it up pretty quickly. Now, there is a limitation. The speed should never exceed 15 pixels per update. So 15 pixels per update is the maximum speed the ball can move. And you'll find that is quite quick and it's going to be difficult to follow in the game. Thirdly, actually no, that's good. So the ball is going to increase and max out at 1 pixel per update. Now, graphics. What are your expectations for graphics? Well, what you see in front of you is a level 3. It's got all the basics. It's got all the data is displayed, so the scores, the times, any indications of instructions. It's very clear, all the different parts of the game, the borders, the paddles, the balls, the brick walls, everything is very clear. But everything is just drawn shapes. In fact, they're all rectangles. Everything in there except the text is a rectangle. So even the brick walls, which look like they have a border, they don't really have a border. I've basically drawn a filled rectangle and then I drew a non-filled rectangle on the exact same position to make it look like it is. Now that this is a very basic graphical style. So if the level 3 is all you're gunning for at this point and you would just want to get onto your ISU, that's your minimum expectations here. Now if you want to increase your score and you want to get up to level 4, there's a few things you may want to consider doing. Use images instead of rectangles. So what that means is instead of storing arrays of rectangles for your brick walls and individual rectangles for everything else, what you're going to do is be storing arrays of sprite sheets and individual sprite sheets. And the location is always based on their their destination rectangle. Another thing you may want to do is add in an AI. So instead of just making it 2-player, you give them the option of playing 1 player against an AI. Now you got to be careful with this though, because you don't want the AI to be perfect. If the Y value of the AI is always matching the Y value of the ball, the AI will never ever lose. So you have to add some form of modification in there to make sure that the AI is not perfect. Sound, music, add in some of that. Animation, which you already know how to do, very straightforward. You just got to find your right sprite sheets. Maybe the option of some buffs and debuffs or some power-ups, that kind of thing. So maybe you have the ability to like grow or shrink your paddle, or speed up or slow down the ball, those kinds of things. Play with it, see what you can come up with. So these are the types of things we're looking at. Maybe you have the idea of like a high scoreboard or somewhere along those lines. You can do a lot of different things within this game. It's a pretty interesting game. So just give you a quick little demo. Now remember that the capture software that I use captures at a whopping 10 frames per second, but the game is running at 60 frames per second. So it's going to look pretty choppy to you, but rest assured, and on my screen it's actually quite smooth. So to start the game, I got to hit space. Now I'm going to be controlling both players at the same time. You can see it's moving up and down. I can bounce different now depending on where I make it collide. I can produce some different effects, and it's moving pretty quick. You can see some stuff get faded away. It bounced off my own back, and then back out the same wall again. So I basically scored on myself there. So let's get it going again. We're going to block. You can see it speed up every time it bounces off of something. Let's see if we can get it. I'm trying to force a score in an end game here. There we go. Player 1 wins. Do you want to play again? If I hit no, it will exit. If I hit yes, everything will reset. So we see everything's back at its original state again. So that's what your expectations are. That's what you're going to build. Have some fun with it. See what you can do.